Kia ora koutou, my name's John Taylor, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Enabling Good Lives, which is a new system the government's embarked upon to try and improve support services for disabled people in New Zealand. So Enabling Good Lives is now government policy, and its intent is to assist disabled individuals and their families to have increased control over their lives, to map out what a good life looks for them, and to have supports that match the way that they think they need to be delivered. This process started back in 2007 when there was a select committee investigation into the state of disability support services within New Zealand. And what it found was that there were very limited options for disabled people. They often felt they had no choice and control, and that the funding was incredibly inflexible. By 2011, the Minister of Disability Issues set up a working group of sector stakeholders to decide what could be done about this situation, and they came up with what is now called Enabling Good Lives, which is fundamentally 8 principles, which you can see on this slide. In the past 7 or 8 years, we've been testing out how this can look through a system called system transformation, which is where we're adapting government processes to try and reach the outcomes that Enabling Good Lives is looking for. Essentially, there's 5 or 6 parts to this. The first one is each person and family gets an independent facilitator or advocate to work with them to decide, what does a good life look like for you? What do you need to be able to support your son or daughter really well? And what do they need to do well wherever they are, be it school or in some other place? This facilitator helps you work through the types of supports you want and how they might be funded by the government. That funding then turns into a single bucket of money which all the government departments feed into, so that you're no longer chasing around different government departments trying to get different amounts of money. The focus is very much on assisting the family and the person live their lives in the community, do what they want to do, strengthen their connections with the community, and have that individual, that disabled person, be an active and valued citizen within their community, which means taking part in education, training, employment, being with friends, relationships, families, and any other cultural activities that are important for them. Why we needed to change was that in the past, the government designed how support services should be. They did this through a system called service specifications, where they wrote out exactly how the service should look, what the outcome should be, and how it should be provided. Inevitably, for people with higher support needs, and many people with Prader-Willi syndrome fall into this group, this meant group solutions. So we're looking at group homes, group daytime facilities, and inevitably that means that it's a one-size-fits-all approach. However, for many people this means a one-size-hardly-fits-anybody approach. And this has led to an investment in facilities rather than flexible services, and that's one of the things that the Select Committee agreed needs to change, hence Enabling Good Lives. So what can this all do for somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome? Well, the exciting thing about the implementation of Enabling Good Lives is that it really does allow families to design the types of support that they think would suit their son or daughter, and allows them to no longer have to go shopping for an off-the-shelf service and then spend years trying to adapt it to suit their family member. They can now design those supports the way they think it should work right from the beginning. So if we map out the process for how it might work, when your child is diagnosed with Prader-Willi syndrome, or in fact any other disabling condition, you'll be contacted by or referred to an independent facilitator. This person will help you think about what you need and your family needs and your son or daughter needs to have a good life, to thrive in the community. They'll use this information to develop a support plan with funds attached to it that the government will provide to assist you. Now, these funds are aimed at achieving the goals and supports that you have set, not slotting you into something that already exists. For example, if you decide to buy locks for your cupboards or fridge, then you can use funds to do that without having to go back and get 15 people to agree to it. This can happen because one of the fundamental shifts in the way the new system works is that it will consider your needs from a strength-based perspective. This is looking at how the person achieves a good life, not just what they can't do. So the funding is wrapped up into what we call a personal budget, and you have total say-so over how that money is spent. Doesn't mean you have to manage it. You can have somebody else manage it on your behalf, including the provider, but you get to say how that money should be spent to get a good life for you and your family member. Research has shown that even without the practical advantages that this brings, there is strong evidence that just having a personal budget improves the quality of life, sense of empowerment, self-determination, and levels of choice and control that people experience. And a personal budget has been shown to change the aspirations of what disabled people and families think that they can achieve with their lives. And Rachel is an example of this. This personal budget can be used flexibly, and over time you can go back and have it changed depending on what you need. So when you've got a young child, you might go back and change it every 6 months or a year, and when the person's older and settled in the community, you might not have to change it very often at all. So Enabling Good Lives is the way that New Zealand is looking to match supports and services to fit the individual, and I think there's great opportunity here for people with Prader-Willi syndrome to really benefit from this new system.
In New Zealand, we have approximately 80 people over 18 with Prader-Willi syndrome. Most of these live in residential care, and approximately 10 still live with family, and a very few live semi-independently. In New Zealand, all children have the right to attend mainstream schools, and our children with Prader-Willi tend to do well in their early years. Some are fortunate to receive extra funding for teacher aides and classroom support, but this is getting more and more difficult to obtain as the number of applications has vastly increased, but the funds available has not. We believe that learning support is vastly underfunded in New Zealand. Although our children love being at school, the day-to-day challenges and anxieties can be accentuated in that busy classroom environment. And without extra support, the child and family are often experiencing problems from around high school age, which is 12 to 13 years. And then that transition from school to the next stage of life creates a new set of challenges. And families say they almost need to learn a new language to navigate their way through funding systems and finding social and living and meaningful life options for their young adult. This person is possibly feeling quite isolated at this stage of life. They have very limited friends, perhaps feeling lost their confidence. It's difficult to maintain routines and directions, which all adds to escalating behaviours. And although we have good flexible funding systems for support, such as individualised funding, the amount allocated can vary greatly, so families can find it difficult to purchase that support. And many don't live near their extended families anymore, so can't employ family members, and there are few options available for respite care unless you're in the cities. So with limited options for the person to be involved with during the day, and parents are trying to work, they often end up in day services that are designed for people with perhaps less ability, whereas our young people are often very competent and quite savvy in many areas such as technology and money, and we all know they're good debaters. And those not familiar with the complexities of Prader-Willi syndrome can struggle to support them effectively. We're also experiencing an increase in the number of the young people having to leave their family home in their early to mid-teens, often in crisis, as the family is no longer able to cope with the needs of their child 24/7. This has a huge impact on all involved, and it usually means that suddenly a lot of money is then needed to accommodate and care for this young person who's moved from the family home to a residential facility that likely has no experience of Prader-Willi syndrome. It would be far more helpful to have this funding support the person in their earlier years than be the bandage to repair the damage later. Mental health support is another system that's not working well. Too long for referrals and a lack of expertise around Prader-Willi syndrome. Most adults and family members have said that time after leaving school was the hardest. There is burnout, and evident distrust and confusion around the education and care system. Approximately 40% of our adults live in the 4 main cities, and the rest are spread throughout the country. So because of the small population base and the spread, exposure and experience of working with Prader-Willi has been limited. Most of you all know our people require high-level skill and knowledge by support staff and management who understand Prader-Willi syndrome and how to manage it. So training and education has been one of our main focuses. We're really encouraged that there is definitely a desire to learn more by care providers and others in the disability sector, which is resulting in some very good service practice throughout the country. We have a few large providers in New Zealand that offer residential and vocational services throughout the country, and many smaller providers as well, some as small as maybe 5 or 6 people in that service. So due to the extent of our small population spread throughout the country, most residential services are likely to only have 1 person, so they tend to live in mixed homes. We have one specific house where 4 ladies have lived together for over 20 years, and another house where 2 men with Prader-Willi share with others. There are pros and cons to group home situations, such as having that skilled support teams, and the environment can be better set up for food security and management, and the service provision can be more Prader-Willi specific. However, it does tend to mean sometimes that one size fits all, which can limit individuality and choice. Staff burnout can also be a problem, and learned behaviours from each other. We're not aware of any people living independently in the community without a reasonably high level of support. There are a handful of families who have their adult living at home. Most have either not yet found a living alternative or have returned home when prior experiences didn't work out. The success of these living at home arrangements is usually dependent on a strong network of family and friends. Most of our adults have said they'd like to live more independently, perhaps share with someone else or have their own flat or house. But, and although this is changing, the current model does not easily accommodate this. We've been really fortunate to work with some of our adults in the past few years through family group camps, adult leadership weekends and regular Zoom chats. And through this collaboration, they've given us some really good insight and advice to their thoughts and desires, what they need and want, and how our association can help them. We believe health, choice and life are improving for our people, and we're really optimistic about the future.